let's get to know the nutrition facts labels. The first question we have to ask is, why should I even use nutrition facts labels? Well, the answer to that is several different reasons. The first is it gives us information on the amounts of specific nutrients. So we might ask, gosh, how much fat is in this product? Or how many calories does it have? The nutrition facts labels give us that information. We might want to be looking at a like product, breakfast cereals, for example. We would be able to use the information on the nutrition facts panel to say, okay, this cereal has this amount of sugar or this amount of fiber, and take a look and compare between cereals to find the best choice. We might also look at the ingredients list, because many times we need to avoid or cut back on a specific ingredient. For example, if we had a food allergy, the ingredients list would help us to determine if that product had what we were trying to avoid. So let's take a look at what information is actually on our nutrition facts label. We're going to start with serving size and number of servings per container. So if we look right underneath nutrition facts, that's where we will find that information, is right underneath the nutrition facts. So we're going to use this to help us to determine a lot of other things. Now keep in mind that the serving size is provided in familiar units, such as cups, tablespoons, pieces. Now you'll notice that in addition to the 1 cup in our particular nutrition facts label, we also have 228 grams. And that is just if we were to weigh it out, how much that 1 cup would weigh. Now keep in mind that your serving size and the serving size that's listed on nutrition facts are not always the same. You might actually be eating more or less than what it states. We also need to be aware of the servings per container. So for example, here we're actually getting 2 servings in our 1 container, which sometimes is a little bit misleading. A great example would be like a 16-ounce bottle of pop. You know, when we think about it, we tend to think about it as eating or drinking, in this case, it all at one time. But in reality, it's 2 or maybe even 2.5 servings. So we need to keep that in mind, that the serving size is important because it influences all the nutrient amounts listed. So keep in mind that all of the rest of this label is based off of that 1 serving size that's listed. So our 1 cup serving in this example. If you eat more than that, that's okay. You just need to, let's say we ate 2 cups, we would just need to double the rest of the information. Next up, let's take a look at calories. So calories, and again, this is based off of our 1 serving. So calories are listed right underneath that big black line. And calories are basically just going to provide us with a measure of how much energy you get from 1 serving. Now, whether this is a lot of calories or not too many calories depends a lot on how many calories you need for the day. Next, we're going to take a look at the nutrients. And basically, when we're talking about nutrients, we're talking about the rest of the label. So all of the rest of the information is all about the nutrients that are in our particular product. So it's the top section of our label. Now, it shows things that are important for our health and separates them into 2 main groups. Now, it's important to recognize that there are some things that we probably need to limit. So things that you might need to limit would be total fat, saturated fat, trans fat, cholesterol, sodium. We could probably add sugar to that list for some of us. So these are things that are not horrible for us, but in general are things that we want to include less of in our diet. Then there are things that are more important for promoting good health. So these are things that we want to make sure we get enough of. Many of these are things that Americans tend not to do very well with. So we're going to think about things like potassium. Keep in mind, potassium is not always listed on the label. Dietary fiber, certainly something that most Americans need a little bit more of. And then our vitamins and minerals. The things that are always listed on the label are right there: vitamins A, vitamin C, calcium, and iron. You may find that your label has a lot more vitamins and minerals listed, but those are the 4 that are required to be on every label. finally on our label here, we're going to take a look at the footnote. And right here is our footnote. So the interesting thing about our footnote is that it's going to tell us what the percent daily value is based on. We haven't talked about that yet, so we'll come back to percent daily value. You might have noticed that, but we'll come back to that. But basically, what we're looking at is that percent daily value is what it gives us. So let me go back for just a second to our part here with that footnote. Is keep in mind that it is based off of either 2,000 or 2,500 calories. So it just is reminding us that that's what the daily value is based off of. So let's talk more about that percent daily value. And those are all of these percentages that are listed along the side here. Those are all of our percent daily value numbers. So again, this is based off of 2,000 calories. So that means that it may or may not be exactly what you should be eating for the day. So what this is saying is that if you consume 2,000 calories, this is the percentage of that nutrient that this product gives you toward what you should have for the whole day. So for example, if we look at fat, total fat, it says 12 grams or 18% daily value. So out of all of the saturated fat that we should have for the whole day, then this gives us 18% of that total, which if we look down at our little footnote, it says 20 grams. Now, you may or may not be eating a 2,000 calorie diet. A lot of us, that's not enough calories if you're really active throughout the course of the day, or that may be too much if you are a smaller person or more sedentary. However, we can still use this as a reference. Now, one other thing before we come back to that is the fact that not all nutrients have a daily value. So if you look at trans fats, if you look at sugar and you look at protein, you'll notice that they just do not have a daily value that's been set. So I said we could use it as a reference, and this is our quick guide. So if you look at those percentages, granted they may or not be exact for you, but 5% or less of a daily value says it's low in that nutrient. And that could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing. It depends. So if we're looking at saturated fat, for example, something that we want to have less of in our diet, 5% would be good. We would like that to be low. However, if we're looking at something like vitamin C, for example, that we would like to have more of in our diet, then having a low number is not a good thing. So 20% or more is considered to be high. Again, that could be a good or a bad thing. So if we look at our nutrition facts for our sample product here, you'll notice that this may not be the healthiest choice, depending, but it is fairly high in saturated fat. You'll notice it has a lot of sodium. However, if we look down at vitamins and minerals, it also has a lot of calcium. So we kind of need to remember to look at the whole picture and not just focus in on one particular nutrient. So again, we can use this information for making comparisons. So I could take a look at like products and look at those percentages and also think about dietary trade-offs. So if I have something that's a little bit higher in saturated fat for this item, gosh, if I could choose something else later on in the day, it all balances out. So let's talk a little bit more about labeling laws and rounding. Manufacturers are allowed to round down to 0 if the product contains less than 0.5 grams of a nutrient. And this is important to remember because that means 0 does not necessarily mean 0. And especially trans fats. I always encourage people to look at trans fats because there are lots of products that say 0 trans fats, but when we look at the ingredients, which we'll talk about in a second, we'll see that it probably does contain some trans fats. So just something to keep in mind. So let's talk about those ingredients. And we have a sample ingredient here. We'll talk about this in a second. But remember that ingredients are listed by quantity of weight. So for example, the first ingredient that you see is going to be the one that there is the most of by weight. So if we look at our ingredients here, we can see that we have some enriched flour. That's our first ingredient. We come on down because we have a whole bunch of stuff that's in our enriched flour. So we had our first ingredient was flour. Our second ingredient is corn syrup. Our third ingredient is sugar. So that says that the top in 3 ingredients, 2 of them are going to be sugar. So again, not maybe a horrible product, but let's see if we can choose something else. Other things that we might look for, we can also say, gosh, what else is in my product? Are there things that I might not want to have? There's nothing really horrible in here. Certainly when we look at this, it's not a natural product. There are lots of additives and flavorings and colorings and things like that. The one thing that I would probably look at this product and say, gosh, maybe I could choose something different, would be the hydrogenated palm kernel oil. So that hydrogenated palm kernel oil is a source of those trans fats that we were talking about earlier. So again, we can use the ingredients for avoiding certain ingredients and determining the source of nutrients. So for example, we might look at a product and say, gosh, it has a lot of sugar, but when we read the ingredients, we see that, well, it's not from added sugars, like in this case, our corn syrup and our sugar, but it might be more from like a fruit. And so that would still be sugar, but it's a little bit healthier source. Let's talk next about nutrient content claims, because you're going to see things like low fat, those types of things listed on there. So just general guidelines. Keep in mind that there are specific definitions for each one of them, but in general, if you see something that's free, that means it has the least possible amount of a specific nutrient. Very low or low means it has a little bit more than foods labeled as free, but still pretty low. Reduced or less means that it has 25% less of the nutrient than the regular version of the food. It may not be that low, it just has 25% less. So other claims to be wary about, we need to look at things like fortified, enriched, added, extra, plus. Basically it means that things were taken out that naturally would have been there, like minerals, fiber, and then we added things back. So vitamins are very common in that. That's not to say that it is a bad product or that it doesn't have nutritional value. It just means that it is low. Fruit drinks. When we see a fruit drink, that just means that it's not really from fruit. It maybe has the flavor of fruit, but probably not a lot of really natural things that are in there, and typically more sugar. Made with wheat, rye, multigrains. Multigrains sound great, but keep in mind that we can have lots and lots of refined grains. And what we really want to look for is whole grain. So look for terms like 100% whole grain in your breads or crackers or cereals. Natural? Natural doesn't mean anything. It may have been natural once upon a time, but we can still call a processed product natural. So this really doesn't tell us much about the product at all. Organically grown, pesticide-free, or no artificial ingredients might be great. If we're looking for something that is organic, we want to look for 100% organic. And then finally, sugar-free or fat-free. Just because it doesn't have sugar or fat does not mean that it still has no calories. And that's obviously, if it's fat-free, it will not have fat. But we find that a lot of times when we take out one product, we put in something else, or take out one ingredient, we put in something else. So keep that in mind, that just because it's sugar-free or fat-free does not necessarily mean it's a super healthy product. Finally, I have some more information. If you are interested in reading about this in a little bit more detail, the FDA has a great little website, the American Heart Association, Mayo Clinic, and WebMD all are great resources, and I've listed them here just to give you a little bit more information about label reading. So thank you. I would hope that you have enjoyed our presentation today, and this has given you some insights on reading labels.